Welcome back to Propaganda by the Seed. I have lost track of whether I'm weeks or months late at this point getting something out, and I had high hopes of maintaining this one long episode, one short per month. That's completely just gone out the window at this point. I had COVID that fucked up my schedule a bit, and then shit just kept happening here and there. And every time I get close to being caught up with everything, then something breaks or something goes wrong, and I've finally gotten caught up with all the real high priority stuff. So I was able to take a little time to edit this podcast, and that's fine. I will at least continue to edit one interview podcast a month for the foreseeable future. And when I feel like I have time, I'll probably go back to doing some short ones too. I had considered doing a short pod on some politics stuff because the politics of the moment are fucking crazy and the world is on fire, and it felt important to talk about it, but I didn't get to it. And since that's not like something I'm particularly good at, I'm going to leave it for people who are better at it. So I highly recommend The Dugout, another podcast on Channel Zero Network. They're killing it. Got some really interesting stuff on all sorts of politics topics. And there's also an episode of It Could Happen Here, a Cool Zone Media podcast that I thought was particularly good. It's called What Must Be Done, The Battle Against Fascism. So maybe check that out too. But for now, here is my interview with Laura Seeger about apples. And it was a fun conversation. I've been meaning to do a Apple podcast for a long time and finally got around to it. So we'll get to that shortly. But first, let's hear from our friends at the Channel Zero Podcast Network.
Now on the Channel Zero Anarchist Podcast Network, tune into The Beautiful Idea,
a project from a collective of several anarchist and autonomous media producers scattered around the world.
We're bringing you interviews and stories from the front lines of autonomous social movements and struggles,
as well as original commentary and analysis.
Episodes include action news, interviews with frontline organizers, and deep dive discussions.
Check out thebeautifulidea.show and the Channel Zero Network for more information.
Welcome to Propaganda by the Seed. If you would like to introduce yourself however you want, that would be great.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Aaron. My name is Laura Seeger. I use they, them pronouns, and I work for Fedco Trees, amongst other various jobs.
Cool. Could you tell us a little bit about the work you're doing with tree fruits and apples and how you came to be interested in that sort of thing?
Yes, that's, that could be long, but...
Take as much time as you need.
Okay, fantastic. The work that I do with tree fruits and trees right now is sort of split between the seasons. In the winter, this time of year, I spend most of my time pruning trees for sort of like independent clients. Through a little fruit tree pruning service that Liz Yeager and I have been doing for several years now called Maine Fruit Buds. And
that's a great name.
Thank you. And also collecting scion wood for Fedco for all of Fedco's grafters and for the scion wood that gets sent out through the catalog, and then a bunch of it goes to the scion exchange. So that's this time of year. And during the growing season, for many years, I managed MOFGA's Maine Heritage Orchard. And since I left that job, I've had like a funnier kind of like hodgepodge of other tree work. And so I work with John Bunker, who's my like longest standing mentor and a really important person in my like fruit tree life, and especially with apples.
Yeah, I think he's been a mentor to many folks and at least 2 previous Propaganda by the Seed interviews.
Perfect. Yeah, definitely. He's Jacob and I call him our Apple dad. He's everyone's Apple dad,
That makes a lot of sense. And one day I'll drag him onto this podcast.
Yeah, definitely. He'd be a good fit for it. And so I work with him and his wife Cammie at their farm doing all sorts of stuff. A lot of it is in the orchard and a lot of it is just other stuff on the homestead. And last year I was working with my friend Tom Vigu and Eileen Fingerman at their homestead farm, and they have a lot of fruit trees as well, but I was primarily working the veggie gardens, which is kind of a nice change of pace for me. It had been a long time since I'd been doing much with vegetable or with any like annuals. And the year prior to that, I was working with Seth Dientes over at North Branch Farm in Monroe and doing from my experience, that was a larger scale nursery production than I'd been a part of. And Fedco has been sort of like a staple through that my employment is now almost year round, but it's like a little bit different times of year. So I've been working with Jacob Matlick in his nursery at After the Fall Farm, doing some of a lot of just like nursery maintenance, but also he has been getting more into like some of the experimental growing techniques of like a lot of the trees and shrubs that Fedco has sold for many years but can't source locally very well. He's been trying to figure out how to propagate some of those woodies with like a little more ease than we have before. So that's been a really fun part of my work since leaving MOFGA. Cool. Is getting into different nursery growing.
Yeah. Everyone that you mentioned working with are all wonderful people. I know all those people, yeah. And they're all like really good at what they do and really awesome people.
Yeah. We have such a good fruit tree community up in Maine.
We're very lucky with that. Like, despite our like short seasons and terrible soils, totally. Like it is a nice place to grow stuff. Yeah, because of the like community. Yeah, and everybody seems to really be in collaboration. I've like talked to other people who I've like met through the fruit tree world in different locations, who come to Maine and are blown away by how collaborative of an experience it is. Like, there's not a lot of competition from like one nursery to another, one orchard to another. Everybody kind of knows each other and is friends, and is like helping each other in different ways, which is so amazing. I think I take it for granted a little bit. Yeah, that's been my experience as well. It's just like people are super nice and like, yeah, even though we might technically be in competition, kind of, we just kind of ignore it. Yeah, exactly. So on to our topic of apples. Where do apples come from, like, as a species? Yeah. So the like domesticated apple as we know it, the like large fruited, nice tasting apples originate in Kazakhstan. Apples in the like fresh eating sense of what we have right now have been sort of morphed by hybridization over hundreds, thousands of years. Because, for millennia, there have been apples all over the place, and there were native apples in North America long before any of the colonizers came with seeds from Europe. And there are native species, throughout other parts of the globe as well. But the large fruited apple, I think it's the Malus sylvestris, was the sort of like key component to getting what we know as our eating apples now. Came from Kazakhstan and through traveling primarily by seed on paths like the Silk Road, and then also making their way by boat to this country, this like landmass, that now we have these domestic apples that are, well, now they're kind of insane. There's literally, have you known that there's an apple in the grocery store now that you can buy that's called Ludacrisp? Nice.
It is. I mean, it is like some of the apples you see, they're so huge. It's ludicrous, but there's literally an apple called
Ludacrisp.
Ludacrisp now.
That's a pretty great name.
It's a really good name. I wish the apple was a little better, but it's it's edible.
Yeah.
But these, these huge apples have been a product of, many different apple species crossing and propagating by seed for a long time and coming over this way. And so, and there are collections that have, more of these like true wild species that are from Kazakhstan and that entire region, as well as lots of like collections that have some native and wild malus species from China and but they came from sort of the mountain ranges. I think that's the Tian Shan Mountains. I'm probably gonna get that wrong. In Kazakhstan is where they say they originated. That there are forests of native apples that had larger fruit than a lot of the apple species. There were malus species all over the place that had like these little, the tiny fruited crabs. But these larger fruited and more palatable, like lower astringency, lower tannins, lower acidity, higher sugars, that sort of like genetic profile came from Kazakhstan. Cool. And and so they're, I think that's it, right?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
Any idea how they became sort of the iconic temperate fruit? Because there's so many like pears or peaches or plums or whatever that seem like they could be like the thing. But when people think of temperate fruit, it's like an apple.
Yeah. That's a fun question. I don't know that I've thought about that before. It's like, why did apples become so iconic? There
might not be a particular reason.
If I had to like sort of throw a dart and like guess about it, probably because apples are fairly long-lived. They can live for a couple hundred years. A single tree can live for a couple hundred years pretty easily, in like the right conditions. They're really adaptable. They can grow in like quite a variety of soils, and weather conditions. Because of how easily they grow from seed just in the soil, you get a lot of disease resistance. That I think is helpful for their longevity for sure. I mean, I think of something like peaches, where peaches in some ways ought to be the iconic fruit, but where we live, like peaches are kind of fragile and they're a little finicky and not as long lived, and also just the way that they grow, the trees break so much more easily. Apple trees are pretty rugged, and oftentimes their trunk and some of their branches will grow in like a spiral shape, ever so slightly. You don't always see it unless like you're seeing like a dead trunk with the
bark off.
The bark stripped off. But sometimes you can tell even while it's alive that oftentimes they'll kind of grow at this like with a slight twist, and I think that makes their just like the tree's structure itself really rugged and
fascinating
and kind of hard to be destroyed. I mean, I've seen a lot of trees that like the original trunk is there, even like branches have like broken off and or been cut off or whatever, knocked off for whatever reason, and they just like keep kind of regrowing, like a pollard a little bit.
Yeah.
In the way that like I think willows can be really rugged, but apple trees also don't tend to blow over that often. It can happen, of course, but
yeah. My neighbor has a apple tree that's like over 250 years old.
Wow.
And you can see that at one point it was this absolutely massive trunk that then hollowed out and a big chunk of it fell off. So now it's like this crescent shape where it's got like good bark on one side of the crescent and then just like rot on the other. But it's still like a big tree and still produces fruit.
Yeah, so cool. I think that apples just have this like really rugged like will to live. They're so resilient.
They don't quit.
They don't. And I mean, of course, now there's like all these different rootstocks and things, but I think like apples from seed, once they get established, they're kind of hard to kill unless you cut
That's
them
an
at the ground.
interesting distinction, because I've grown some other stuff that's not quite as well suited to this environment, like persimmon, say. Persimmon is difficult to get established as a grafted plant, but persimmon seedlings are super easy. Same with pawpaw, so
Yeah. Interesting.
that's an interesting distinction. What do you know about the transition of apples being grown as like a seedling tree that maybe had more utility or was more commonly used for cider, to being more grafted varieties that are more like dessert type or like food apples?
Yeah. So I think that, grafting, I'm like, yeah, I guess I'll just start there because that's where my mind's going to, is that from what I've heard, just even the technique of grafting has been around for like way longer than really any of us would imagine. I think that there's some sort of writing or an illustration that Pliny the Elder was involved in like grafting, or like of that era. There was grafting of fruit trees happening.
Yeah, like classical Greece.
Yeah.
I think there's also some super old evidence of grafting from like ancient China too.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
But I think both of those cultures were doing it like thousands of years ago.
Right. So like that's always almost as long as like people have been growing plants, or like, assisting in like the cultivation of plants around them, grafting has like existed. But plants like apples have been grown from seed forever too, and I think it's you get a pretty good chance of having an apple that you can maybe not have as like a nice fresh eating dessert apple, but there's a pretty good chance that an apple grown from seed will be useful in some way, if you're willing to be like using apples in the many ways that people do and did traditionally, of like having cider, hard cider vinegar, baked apples, cooked apples, preserved apples in like different forms, pickled apples, dried apples. Now people, I think, in like a mainstream way, kind of tend to think of apples as just like you want them to be like perfectly sweet and tart and balanced and crispy and like just right when you eat it. And for also like millennia, people were using apples in ways that were primarily not eating them fresh. And so I think that as people's like favor towards having fresh fruit to eat changed, also the trend of having grafted fruit that was exactly what you wanted also came with that. And I think it was I couldn't even name the century, I guess, but it's the 1400s to 1700s. There were people, it was like the wealthy elite for the most part, who had like more curated like gardens and things, had grafted fruit, and they were naming varieties and passing around cyanwood to so that people could have like just what they wanted. I think that the lady apple, or it's sometimes called api, API, api. It's like a little crab apple the size of like a ping pong ball or something. They're beautiful, yellow, pink blush, and really aromatic. They're like fine fresh eating. I like them, but they're not like highly flavored. But those I think have been around since like sometime in the 1400s. I could be wrong. It might be it might be 1600s, but I think it might be 1400s. I think it's like a really ancient variety.
That's fascinating. I could believe that. I think Green Gage, that plum, is also of a similar like 1500s.
It's crazy.
Just like this clonal line from that time.
Yeah. So nuts. It's just like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
That we can like eat fruit that is of the same type that people were eating hundreds of years ago.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
I also wonder what people who are like selecting varieties hundreds of years ago would think about stuff like Cosmic Crisp. It's like so It's
Yeah.
so nuts.
That is a fascinating idea. Like, yeah, would they be blown away and like, this is the most amazing thing ever? Or would they be
They're
like,
like-
it's too sweet?
Like, what have you done? Yeah, this is impractical. Like, you need
That
to
apple just
store
ain't
them
right.
where to keep them that long?
You need to do what to the atmosphere?
Yeah, so I think like in the trend, well, I guess there was also like the temperance movement also had a lot of sway here on grafted trees because people were cutting down seedling orchards because that was like the devil's fruit. It was like going to
That's where alcohol comes from.
Yeah, it was like going to make cider, and so if people had seedling trees, they were making cider from them, and so it was like the grafted trees that were for a fruit market, like a fresh fruit market.
Yeah. The wholesome trees.
Yeah, it's so odd.
Wow,
but then
that's
also like
wild.
I mean John Chapman, Johnny Appleseed, he like really thought that the seedling apple was like the only pure and good thing, that like grafted apple trees were like really an abomination.
Yeah. He was kind of a religious weirdo, too.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, that's what I hear. So there's like, a couple at least, a few different like funny angles about grafted trees versus ungrafted trees. But I think also like, as New England and then more of North America became settled by Europeans and the sort of like European standards of agriculture were forced upon this land. There was also more in the way of like sort of a push from a state or from a region for fruit trees and like other types of agriculture for sure. But there were people who would like go around as itinerant grafters and just like they'd carry the scion wood with their little labels from some orchard and like move along their region throughout their state or like up the coast, offering their service of grafting fruit trees.
Yeah. Amazingly, I think that's still a thing.
Yeah.
I've seen some videos of like migrant labor grafters who are just
awesome.
fucking flying through these grafts, doing like several hundred or even thousands in a day.
Yeah.
And like
Incredible.
you don't get that good unless you're doing it all the damn time, and
Right.
no one needs like just someone like, here, graft me up 10 million trees.
Right.
So they, they move around and work for different big places, but that's
Yeah.
like who's doing the hands-on grafting for these like big industrial operations.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's specialized work. As you're saying, you can't really get good at that unless you're just, practicing for a hobby, I guess. But you're not going to be doing that in application for yourself or for one nursery or for one orchard.
Yeah.
And it's really amazing that specialized labor is able to like to travel in the way that it does. Back when the state was sort of like pushing for varieties of fruit trees to be grown, there were itinerant grafters, and there were also I think like tree salesmen who would go around. Like there weren't a lot of nursery companies, like you couldn't really mail order trees in the early days of people planting trees in mass here. But there were like sort of like fruit peddlers or like little tree peddlers who would like go around and they'd have like, a wagon load of trees. And you could buy whatever varieties, they had from them. And then it was also like later on, even after like sort of the orchard industry was kind of established out this way, that there was a big freeze in the winter of 1934, where a lot of trees were lost, a lot of fruit trees were lost that people thought were pretty hardy, and so then there was like this other wave of what varieties people were just finding to be hardy and worth growing for like the commercial fruit industry. And so then they were really pushing that you should like be cutting out all of your varieties that weren't part of this like I think it was called, was it like the New England Seven or something? There were just a few.
It's like a core collection of ones
Yeah.
like, oh, these survived the freeze of 34.
Right.
That's what everyone should grow.
Exactly. And so the
Interesting. It
state
kind
was
of
like,
bottlenecked the varieties that were common.
yeah, exactly. And so that's where like a lot of these older varieties, a lot of which came from Europe, but also many of which were originating here. Just from enough apple trees getting established, that then there were lots of these seedlings that people were growing up and selecting for. So there was a huge loss of diversity in that, just in the push to streamline everything and grow only a few varieties. And in some places, orchards were cut down in mass, and new trees were planted or new varieties were grafted on. And in other places, like in rural Maine, space was not really an issue. So the trees are just sort of there. They were just sort of left behind. And maybe they're in some of them are still in like dooryards. A lot of them have kind of become engulfed in woods. But a lot of those older trees of different varieties are just still out there standing. Whereas in some places, the real estate was a little more like of a hot commodity. So they're like, take the orchard out and put they needed that space. So we're kind of lucky up here that we have we have millions of seedling trees, which we'll probably get into later, but we also have all these old, like you mentioned, your neighbor's tree that's 250 years old. We have all these old trees that are just kind of like still standing around.
Yeah, totally. That seems like a good prompt to talk about the Maine Heritage Orchard.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yeah. The Maine Heritage Orchard is, I think, a really special project, and I feel very lucky to like have been as involved as I have been. It really was luck. It was a project that John Bunker put together. John and Russell Libby, who was MOFGA's executive director at the time. It was kind of a project that the two of them hatched together, really, and many, many more people have been involved. And there was also, at the very beginning, there was sort of a small core group of people on the orchard committee, and MOFGA took the orchard on as like a thing in a location on land they owned, but not as a project that MOFGA was responsible for, really. The MOFGA didn't provide staff at first.
Kind of hosting.
Yeah, they were sort of like, you can host it here, but all the fundraising has to be done separately. All the labor is separate. And so for the first few years, that's how it was. Is there was a group of volunteers, John and his apprentices, which at the time was, over the first few years were me and several other people. Nick and Kelsey and Jen and Jordan and Abby and Angus were also very involved at that time. And so there was sort of like a group of people like figuring out how to take care of this little like community orchard, which was to serve as I guess sort of as a gene bank, as like as a public collection, really. One of the reasons that John was so adamant about wanting to be involved with MOFGA or some other agricultural institution was that he had made friends with so many rare fruit tree collectors whose collections had just kind of disappeared when they died.
Yeah.
And so he was working to put together this collection, which contained all of his friends' and mentors' collections, as well as other varieties that were historically grown in Maine from different places and from individual trees all over the place. But he wanted those all together and in a place that there could be a commitment from an institution to care for those trees rather than just like one person's lifetime, and then trying to figure out what's next. When the one person who was caring for the orchard inevitably couldn't care for it anymore.
Yeah, that's such a problem with the way that we kind of do things, being so kind of individual and privately held, especially when you're talking about plants that can live 250 years. It's like
Right.
this tree really should outlive everyone you know.
Yeah.
And there needs to be like generations of people caring for these trees if we want to preserve that that heritage of, you know, these varieties and that genetic diversity.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so it's been very cool to see that in many ways work out pretty well.
Yeah.
And the orchard has had its fair share of issues over time, and I won't get
being
too in the weeds
in
about
a
that.
abandoned sand pit.
Yeah, right. That's the
is
thing I didn't mention.
Problematic.
Is that
I think.
the orchard did not get any prime real estate. There's
Yeah.
a beautiful field that is used for parking during the Common Ground Fair 3 days a year, and below that there's a gravel pit. Well, and the gravel has been all scraped away, but there's the remnants of a gravel pit, and so
It's not even a gravel pit. It's the remnants of a gravel pit.
So that's where the special rare collection of apples and pears live.
Indeed.
And it's not quite as bad as it sounds, but it is brutal.
I mean, I also live in the remnants of an abandoned gravel pit, and if you put enough compost and wood chips on it, it's fine.
Exactly. It's the long game.
But it is a lot of work, and yes, frequently I'm like, what would it be like to have just like a flat land with soil that's already there?
Yeah. Right?
But
Dreamy.
yeah,
Yeah.
such is life.
Such is life. So the Heritage Orchard is they did do some earthwork in that first year. I think it was the first trees were planted in 2014. So it was in 2013 in the summertime that they did some earthwork to create some terraces so that it wasn't just a sheer cliff. Though part of it is, part of it couldn't be, was not safe for the machinery, and there was an aquifer situation underneath. But there's the orchard really has a lot of different little zones in it. There's about 10 acres, I think, within the fenced area, and a pond at the bottom, and the far side of the pond is heavy clay, and the apples there really suffered. We planted that area out last. Funny enough, the pears have done pretty well over there.
Yeah, they kind of like a heavy soil.
So it's nice that area isn't totally wasted. But more of the pear collection is living on the other side of the pond now, and there are apples in sort of like a terraced area, and a little bit of like a flat slope that's pretty sandy, or a bit of a flat that's pretty sandy, and there's a slope that has pretty nice soil, and I think was fairly minimally disturbed, and those trees got enormous fast.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it makes a big difference. Any idea how many varieties there are these days?
I think that we've been saying that there are about 270 varieties
That's
of
pretty good.
apple, and well, when I left there were around a dozen pears, but Lauren Cormier has been steadily like working on the pear collection, and so there might be a couple dozen, or maybe even a few dozen varieties of pears. I know some of them are still in the nursery over there, but
Cool.
that pear collection is getting beefed out too.
Yeah. Yeah, she loves pears. She was on this podcast talking about pears.
That's what I heard. That's great.
Cool. Well, thanks for that info on the Heritage Orchard. Do you have a favorite apple?
That was on my drive down here. I was wondering if that would be one of the things that comes up, and I was like, "Oh no, what will I say?" Because I don't have a favorite apple. I have
That's
many
fine.
favorites, but
What are some of your
but some of
favorites?
one of my favorites is Grimes Golden, which is just like such a classic apple. I
Yeah.
think it's perfect, and it's also been used in the breeding of a lot of modern apples, and a lot of the older modern apples, and I just think it's one of the best apples. It's really stunning. It kind of has like a matte textured skin, and it's like a little barrel. I don't know. It's very cute. And I think that its flavor is kind of sparkly. It like is just one of the most, I've had a lot of apples that are more flavorful than that, but there's something about Grimes Golden's flavor that I think is just like, it's kind of simple and
it's definitely a classic.
nice, like really nice. And I love summer apples. I'm obsessed with summer apples.
Interesting.
And most
Think
people
of summer apples being
most people kind of hate on summer apples, or they're like, it's boring. Like, why would I eat an apple when I can eat a peach? Which, good point. But also, what if you can eat both? Which we can most years when there's peaches. But one that I had for the first time a few years ago is Charlemont, which is sort of like this class of Russian apples. It's like a red and yellow stripy apple, but it has a really nice flavor and is really sort of floral. And while I love a soft apple, this is a fairly crisp apple for being an early season apple as well. And then like Yellow Transparent and Liveland Raspberry, Chenango Strawberry are all like, and Red Astrakhan, just like wonderful classics for summer apples, I think. And it's around this time of the year that I start to want summer apples.
Yeah, I mean, they are not known for storage typically.
No.
So
no, they're
yeah,
very
so it's been
ephemeral.
quite a while since there was a good Yellow Transparent around.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those summer apples that are that have a softer texture to their flesh make really nice dried apples too. I think they stay kind of like puffier and than some of our more like dense crispy apples, which I like both, but I think I have an affinity for the summer apples as dried apples. But I haven't been eating a ton of apples this winter because I don't have really a good storage situation for apples where I'm living right now. But Black Oxford is a classic and one of the indisputably one of the best apples.
Yeah.
Especially as a winter apple.
It's so beautiful, like that dark purple. Makes like a really cool applesauce. Like the color of it is
stunning.
I find very appealing.
Yes, me too. And then I could go on forever listing apples. And there's also another thing I was thinking about as we were driving down here. As I was like, there's even the entire class of like recently named wild apples that people have been finding that are all have been a part of, not all, but like many of them have been a part of this wild apple and pear exhibition in Western Mass. And there's this apple that like I think of from time to time. I had it one time, probably 3 years ago. And it was
That's how you know you're a real apple nerd. You keep thinking about an unnamed wild apple that you ate 3 years ago.
And someone
That's
had
awesome.
submitted it to this to the pomological exhibition and called it Onderdunk Orange. And my friend Kevin Clark, do you know Kevin? You and Kevin would
I don't
be
think so.
good buds. He works at Rose Hill Farm, managing the orchards there in New York in the Hudson Valley. And he went to great lengths to get cyanwood for the Onderdunk Orange on a very
awesome.
cold winter day. And so I have hope that I will eat it again.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So I have always thought of apples as being a difficult fruit to grow because of their myriad pests and diseases. Would you agree with that, or would you say that there are methods or varieties that make them reasonable to grow as like a home orchardist or hobbyist?
I think like yes to all of that. Apples are difficult to grow. They're especially hard to grow organically. They're especially hard to grow in a home orchard or backyard orchard. And they're difficult to grow in a commercial setting. But when the difference is that in a commercial setting, it's all set up that's what you're doing. The expectation is that there's like a lot of care and chemicals going into it.
You're working on it like every day.
Yeah. And so having like a nice fruit tree by your house and having nice fruit come off of it, it's so hard.
Yeah. I myself have basically failed at growing decent apples here. I've had mostly good results, but at least mixed at Mount Joy Orchard.
Yeah.
But here at my house, we get some apples, and like some years, like, oh, Starkey is like great this year.
Yeah.
Or
That's a really good
whatever.
one.
But it's been a lot of like frustration and
Yeah.
to the point where I'm just not that excited about apples because there's so many people who are like really into it and are growing great apples. And
I know what you mean.
I can like go buy them from someone else.
Right.
Where it's like I fucking love my Illinois Everbearing mulberry that just fucking pumps out fruit. Very little ever goes wrong. And I couldn't like go to the store and buy like a pint of mulberries.
No way. Not here.
But I can just go out and pick them day after day.
Right, with almost no effort for the tree. Yeah.
But I do love apples. I probably eat, like, pound for pound, I probably eat more apples than any other fruit. And one day I will either find a variety that just works super well or I'll just get better at caring for them.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the tricky thing. When I was like first getting into fruit growing, I don't know, probably a decade ago, I like had this sort of like idea in my mind that if I planted an orchard with like a bunch of wild apples, like a bunch of seed, a bunch of trees grown from seed, a bunch of grafted wild apples that seemed to be doing good in surrounding areas that I really liked, and some of like the classic varieties that seemed kind of rugged, that I would end up with like an orchard where it would become obvious which trees were doing well and which weren't, and I could just have the trees that were doing well. And that sort of like was long abandoned for multiple reasons, but I don't really think that's true anymore. I think that one of the difficulties about growing apples in our climate, which is really difficult for pests and diseases, is that when you collect a few apples even in one area, it becomes just like a magnet for pests of all kinds, for mammalian pests and also all of the bugs and critters.
So many bugs.
And the disease afflicts everything, And there are some varieties that have some inherent disease resistance. But I think that there are so many different little like microclimates all over the place. And now every year is so drastically different from one year to the next that that some of these varieties that were considered disease resistant because they've been observed probably in a certain area over a period of time, the weather patterns have shifted so much that like are those also disease resistant in like 4 years of drought and then a spring of like nonstop rain.
Yeah.
And then drought all summer, and then a bunch of rain in the fall. We just have such erratic climate conditions, and like they continue to be more so, that I think that like the evaluation that we've been doing, the greater we of like people evaluating fruit, including like research stations, of course, like the research that takes decades is like, I don't think that it's totally reset, but I think that some of the varieties that have been marketed as disease resistant were, and they're not as much anymore because the weather patterns we're getting are leading to like different patterns of disease showing up in our fruit trees, and trees at large. I mean, it was only 4 or 5 years ago that we got Marsanina leaf blotch up here, and it just takes the leaves off of trees. In the summer they go bare, some of them. And I remember the year that I was at a growers meeting in Western Massachusetts, I heard people talking about it, and I was like, what the hell is Marsanina? They described it, and I was like, phew, we don't have that. It was like, not yet. But 2 years later, we did.
Yeah.
And somebody was like, what's wrong with my tree? It's if your leaf is not, they described it. I looked at the tree and I was like, oh shit, that's Marsanina. And it was in southern Maine, but I was like, okay, it's coming up. And now, it's still, I haven't seen it, in orchards the way that that it has been affecting like some of the orchards in New York, for instance, but it's definitely present. And so we're also just, we're dealing with stuff that that people weren't even thinking about for this area.
Yeah. Like I'd never seen fire blight until two or 3 years ago. And now it's like, wow, that's a major fucking problem.
Right.
And there's not that much you can do about it.
No, there's not much. And it's, and again, like a commercial orchard can deal with fire blight much differently than a home orchard does. A commercial orchard can lose, quite a number of trees and still have a business, and they can be, spraying strep around the clock. And in your home orchard, maybe you have 5 trees and you lose 1 tree. That's a lot. Maybe you lose 2 or 3 trees. That's a lot of tree.
You could lose 50%.
Yeah, easily. So it's tough, but I think that sort of like where apple growing in a less frustrating way or like more optimistic way, I think that it lies in seedlings. I think that like observing what kind of seedlings are in sort of your immediate area, or even like your larger area, your county or your state maybe, and or in similar conditions, like maybe someone who has like really heavy clay soils is looking for seedling apples that are also growing in heavy clay soils, to see if that like condition are growing well, that seem to not have that much disease pressure and that much pest pressure. And then I also think, of like our standard of like what we want out of fresh eating fruit is good to sort of like look at, and if that means like, oh, maybe I want to have a few trees that I'm going to like press for cider, because only 20 or 30 of the apples are nice enough that I want to eat them fresh, because I don't enjoy that much spending a ton of time cutting around little bug holes and stuff.
Yep.
And I do plenty of that, and I don't mind pest damage, but there's some like apple maggot that you can't really do anything about it. You can cut it all away and you get like one bite,
left.
maybe. Yeah.
Are there varieties that you think of are promising seed parents, or is it kind of so specific, like depending on what your needs are?
I would love to say that there's like a variety or two or however many that seem to do well as seed parents, but I haven't observed any that closely. I've observed a lot of seedlings, but most not of parents that I know.
Yeah.
I think, I oftentimes sort of daydream about like where else all the genetic testing for plum fruits could like get us, and sometimes I think like, wow, it'd be amazing if after some time we have like sent off leaves for testing of like many dozens of wild apple selections that people have chosen for good fruit quality and minimal like pest and disease, and see like what parents are in there or grandparents. There's so much back in the relation, but I'm not. Yeah, I can't say for certain what which apples are making nice seed parents.
Cool. Well, that's something to keep an eye on. You were mentioning like we might need to like adjust our expectations for like what an apple is and what it tastes like and what you use it for, which that rings true. Like the apple I am most excited about is I-95.
Yes.
I think it tastes great, and supposedly, with minimal care, Tom Vigou was getting like 70% clean fruit in his orchard.
Yeah.
For I-95.
I've seen it. It's true.
And he always says like, yeah, it's a good apple, but it does have a certain cardboardiness to it, which doesn't bother me. Like,
Yeah.
the flavor is there. I like the texture. It's probably got some extra fiber in there. And that's great. It's probably good for you.
Yeah, totally.
So like that's a downside I can totally live with, and I would love to see like what seedlings of I-95 look like.
Yeah, I would also love to see that. I'm also curious. I thought that maybe I haven't really been keeping up with the recent DNA information, but that might be one that we've sent a sample off.
Oh, cool.
I mean, for years, Jack Cortez and Tom both have said like, oh yeah, it's probably a Red Delicious seedling.
Based on the cardboardiness and
yeah.
the shape.
Yeah. And actually, I mean, the prevalence of Red Delicious and Yellow Delicious seedlings, just like with the assumption of by the the shape and the color and flavor of some of those seedlings are widespread. And I think that John told me once that some of the early apple rootstock that was grown from seed came from canneries where they were making sauce, and it was mostly Red and Yellow Delicious. And so there's like lots of trees out there that their rootstock is a seedling of a Yellow or Red Delicious. And I've also encountered a number of those just like in sort of like roadside finds or whatever, where an apple tastes enough like a Yellow Delicious that it seems like pretty probable that it came from that lineage. And I think which also comes from Grimes Golden lineage, past Grimes down to Yellow Delicious, down to their seedlings. But sometimes they will get, sooty blotch or scab, but I think largely like some of those Yellow Delicious supposed Yellow Delicious seedling fruit I've seen, the trees look pretty rugged, pretty good, clean enough. And also I think, we're talking about adjusting our expectations of fruit, but I think we like also adjusting our expectations of apple trees. A lot of times I'll like get calls from people whose trees I've pruned or sort of know of me through that, about their trees during the growing season, sort of in a panic because of the way the tree looks. And the thing is, most apple trees have some ugly leaves, like quite a few ugly leaves. They're just like going through it, they sort of, there's a lot in our like wet climate that just grows on the leaf surface. And the like sort of pristine looking apple trees in commercial orchards that have like very few specks on their leaves are only that way because of like heavy fungicide. And that's fine. I love commercial orchards for what they are. I'm not generally pro big fungi, but an apple tree that's not getting sprayed with anything, that is just like out there living in the world in your yard or your garden or the woods edge, it's not going to be perfect looking, and that's fine. And there are times to panic a little bit, like fire blight, as you're mentioning.
Yeah.
But the leaves of apples just don't need to be perfect looking. And it's the kind of thing that I feel like if you have a trained eye, even if it's in the way that like you keep an eye on like your houseplants, you like know if something's wrong. If it's really bad, then it's like, ooh, maybe there's something not quite right about this. But if you look at the tree and it looks fine, and you're looking up close and it looks kind of messed up, that's just a tree. It's okay.
Yeah. And some amount of disease pressure is not only to be expected, but I think it has a positive effect on the like nutritional value of the fruit. Like a little bit of scab or whatever actually makes the fruit more nutritious.
I've heard this too.
Because it like the tree's not going to waste effort on these antioxidants and stuff that are part of its immune system if there's no stressors.
Right.
But then when there's some stressors, it like makes extra of that stuff.
Yeah,
So
a balance.
we're getting some benefit from these lightly tended fruit trees
Totally.
as well. So
And there's so many other creatures that are benefiting from the apple tree too. Something that Liz and I talk about a lot in our presentations about fruit trees and orcharding, and also talking with clients about expectations of trees, is also thinking about what the apple tree is for is a good thought exercise, because sometimes we think that it's oh, well, that's a fruit tree. It's for the fruit. We need to have perfect fruit from it, and we should be able to eat every one of them. None for the squirrels. It's well, there's actually so many other functions to the tree in its ecosystem if we take ourselves out of it, and that all of the little tiny caterpillars and beetles and leaf rollers and stuff that are eating the leaves, in a way that's not an infestation. There's just some bugs on there. That's really beneficial for those critters. And also the way that birds use apple trees, and that the squirrels and the groundhogs and everything else, and the mice and the deer are also eating the fruit on the tree or as it falls. And what's happening with all the leaves that fall and decompose. There's so much to a tree that sometimes I think we get a little tunnel vision about well, a tree should have perfect fruit for me to eat.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, in some also some some of the uses of a tree are also just that we can enjoy its shade, or that there's a really there's a tree with a very nice structure that we can see out the window, and there's so many functions to a tree, even if it isn't fruiting really nicely or looking pristine. Firewood also.
Yeah. Yeah, and wood for smoking,
Oh yeah,
fish or whatnot, and craft with fruit wood and
Oh, yeah.
all that good stuff.
yeah, so much.
Do you have any thoughts on dwarfing rootstock versus standard?
Yes, and my thoughts have kind of evolved on it a little bit. I will say that I think for most of my fruit life, I've been a little bit of a hater about dwarf stalks.
Same.
And I still am kind of, but with more grace.
I tend to go with Antonovka.
Yeah, I think that it totally depends on what you want out of a fruit tree, and I think that there is a place for dwarf rootstock. I don't want to grow dwarf trees, but I'm also no longer of the mind that no one should grow dwarf trees. Because part of that is because I've seen how hard people will battle a standard sized tree to try to keep it small.
Yeah.
By just cutting off the top and cutting off every sprout year after year. And my God, that is a horrible battle. And I'd much rather see someone plant a dwarf tree and water it twice a week and fertilize it all the time and make sure it has a nice little stake and be more fussy about it than I would like to see someone just kind of mutilate a tree that wants to be big. Also, the apple tree will always win that fight unless you cut it down and take out the roots. But dwarf, yeah, I think that my aversion to dwarf rootstock is mostly that it's a higher maintenance plant. That it's more like a tomato than it is an apple. And I have seen some really beautifully grown dwarf fruit trees, and you can get really nice fruit off of them. They have shorter lives. We were talking in tree time, so they have more of a 25, 30, maybe 40 year lifespan. Whereas, as discussed, a standard sized tree can live for hundreds of years. And in my morals around growing plants and my aspirations as a very tiny part of this living world, I would like to see trees that have an opportunity to live a long life. I also love climbing trees. I fucking love climbing trees, and you just can't climb a dwarf tree.
That is true.
So like, you know, standard trees, I think that like the expectations of what your relationship with them have to be different than that of a dwarf or semi-dwarf tree. And I think a lot of people's desires sort of fall in like the semi-dwarf route of like wanting a smaller tree, but not like a tiny dwarf tree. They want it to be like able to like stand on its own roots without a stake, but they don't mind a little extra work and some careful pruning to keep it the size they want. But I think there's also something in me. I mean, I trained by John Bunker, right? Like,
Yeah.
He's my mentor, and so I think the amount of standard size fruit trees that I've been able to pick fruit from, collect cyanwood from, prune in, climb in, like just notice from the side of the road as we drive by, those trees would not be here if they were planted on dwarf stock. They would all
long gone.
be gone. And I really like the idea that that some of the trees we're planting, I mean the trees in the Heritage Orchard, for example, and others, that those trees, some of them could be there for people like so many generations in the future that I couldn't possibly dream of knowing who they are.
Yeah.
It's like, and we shouldn't need to. Like, I don't know who planted like the old opalescent tree in Palermo that I love so much, and like that's fine. There have been probably many dozens of people over the decades who have cared for that tree and eaten fruit from that tree and noticed that tree or wondered about that tree, that are all kind of disconnected from the person who grafted that tree or planted it and got it, established while it was young. But there's so many people, and continuing into the future now, who get to enjoy that. And I think that like really long overlap of fruit trees in our lives is like the way that it sort of like makes me feel small is good.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think you made a great, both practical and kind of poetic case for growing standard apples. What would you say are some of the essential techniques that you need to grow apples? Like, what do you need to be doing in order to support an apple tree getting a chance to live for 100 years?
Yeah, you need to be having a lot of patience and knowing that you're not in charge. Your tree might die and then you'd have to start again. But also, more immediately and practically, I think, be like considering yourself an observer of that tree, and so like watering it when it needs water, which I think is like roughly 5 gallons a week if it doesn't rain when they're little, and I consider that the first 2 years. And then because I also was like, I've come from the the world of the main Heritage Orchard and a gravel pit, where hauling water down those terraces was just not going to happen for the 3-year-old trees. They were on their own. Maybe every once in a while if it was a really bad drought, but trying to set them up in their first year, treating them the first 2 years that they're in the ground like really special tender babies. And it's like watering them and keeping their trunk free of weeds and putting a nice mulch like aged wood chips, preferably hardwood, or seaweed, not hay, which is a nice like habitat for mice to live in who love to eat trees. And just like keeping an eye on your tree the first couple of years, especially certain pests like the red-humped caterpillar and eastern tent moth and brown-tailed moth, of course, they can eat the leaves of your whole tree in a day or two. And so keeping an eye on your tree, even, and if it's not somewhere that's like right nearby where you are, even every week or so, just like checking on your tree, just keeping eyes on it. And I think in observing, is it growing? What kind of stuff is on it? If there's a bug you've never seen before on it and there's one of them, like that's fun and interesting. And if there's a ton of them eating the tree, that's a problem.
Yeah.
and I think and also being considerate of deer pressure. Putting a little cage around your tree if it's not in an area that's fenced or in an area where dogs are keeping deer away, for instance. It's really easy to make a cage for a little fruit tree out of a few stakes and some chicken wire or other cheap metal woven wire. And then in the winter time, in looking for borers, I guess, and it's not always in the first couple of years, but until your tree has a bigger trunk and peely bark, looking at the trunk from the ground level up about a foot or foot and a half to see if you see any signs of frass, which looks like orange sawdust coming out of a hole. And sometimes it's right at the soil line, which indicates a round-headed apple tree borer larva is in there, and the larva can live in those trunks for 2 years, sometimes even longer. In the time, that's how long it takes them for the larva to grow and pupate into a beetle and emerge from the trunk, and it can make the trunk of a small tree so weak that it snaps in half. And so I've seen you've seen it too.
I guess I've only lost one tree, but it was my I-95 tree that was just in its first fruit. It was beautiful, and then there was a windstorm and it just cracked in half because of borer damage.
So devastating.
Yeah.
So familiarize yourself with borers. There's a lot of good information. It's we mostly in Maine have the round-headed apple tree borer, though the flat-headed borer is also around. And you can also it feels a little bit theoretical still, but some of us in the weirdo orchard community have been painting the trunk with neem oil for many years and finding that is at least somewhat of a helpful deterrent for borers. It's a really bitter oil, and both borers and mice don't really like it that much.
What are your thoughts on painting with paint?
Yeah, I am interested in that. I know that many years ago they're recommending exterior latex paint and joint compound as a paint both for sun scald prevention and borer prevention. And I think that's good. We were never able to do that at the Heritage Orchard because that was not certifiably organic.
Yeah.
To put that on the trees, but for a few years, I was painting the trunks with a mixture of neem oil and milk paint to try to get some of that the lightening effect of the white powder. And then I had tried using that mixture with kaolin clay as well, because the kaolin clay is it's not cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than milk paint if you're painting 300 trees.
Totally.
And the kaolin clay got weird. It got kind of moldy, and so it wasn't and it was it was a very surface level mold that I don't think affected the trunks much, but it wasn't white anymore. It was kind of grayish, sometimes almost black, and I don't know if that's because of the way that it interacted with the neem oil or it was just the kaolin applied that thick. But I would be interested in trying the sort of trad method of not organic too, and just seeing how that is, because I've also seen a lot of fruit trees suffer from the Southwest injury, and I think if you can combine those things, the neem and the latex paint, that's
cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I've had pretty good results with painting with latex paint.
Nice.
Really important to paint right down to the soil line.
Yeah.
Because the ones that I've gotten right down to the soil line seems to have a really good deterrent effect. But if there's a little bit of space there, then they just lay an egg right at the very base.
It's terrible.
Oh, they're so annoying.
They're so beautiful and they're so horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are some. Oh, and then a little mouse guard, some mesh window screening or a little plastic spiral guard for the winter, to deter rodents.
Yes, which then probably
mice and
comes off
bunnies.
in the spring to not
Yes.
harbor the apple borers.
Exactly. So it is. There's kind of a whole checklist for young apple tree care, but it isn't that much stuff.
Yeah.
It's just more than like once a year. You need to pay attention.
Yeah, totally. How do you deal with orchard moth complex?
Oh, in recent years, I've been using more of those pheromone traps.
Yeah.
There's some company, Tree or something. There's probably a bunch of companies that make these white traps that are, I guess, the top and bottom are each about the size of half a sheet of paper, and they sort of fit together in this metal frame like a little tent, and you paint this sticky stuff, or I guess they come with it painted on there. There's a grid and some sticky stuff painted on the bottom, and then you toss this like little teeny tiny bottle cap looking thing that contains a pheromone into that trap. And I think you're supposed to replace the pheromone at some frequency and check the trap also at some frequency. But that is an indicator for, well, of course, how much of that moth that you're trapping is present in the orchard. And then as an IPM strategy, that is used to tell you when to spray. But alternatively, I mean, I also recommend to some people of traps of all different types for winged insects, that you can also, if you have, one or two fruit trees, or you're even a dozen in your yard, you could hang a trap per tree, and then you're trying to trap enough to make a dent in the population rather than just trapping to find when is your like peak population and then when to spray for it. And so if you're trying to spray, it's a great indicator for timing so that you're not wasting spray material or spraying unnecessarily. And if you're not trying to spray, you can use these pheromone traps as a way to just cut down on the population.
Cool.
But moths are tricky.
Yeah.
Oh, and years ago I was making these traps out of I was making them out of soda bottles for a long time, and then I watched a very convincing YouTube video that you could use motor oil containers with a drilled 1/4-inch hole, and you put a solution of molasses and water and cider vinegar, and this attracts the moths. And the codling moth is so small that all it needs is a 1/4-inch hole. And you're just like trapping them into this gross solution to drown in.
It is real gross.
And I will say the motor oil bottles, you can't see all the nasty drowned moths, which is kind of nice.
Bonus.
Because the soda bottles is like, they look nasty. There are a lot of people at Mofka who were like, what are we doing with these in the trees? Do we really need to have that?
Yeah, I have experimented
They get
somewhat
gross.
with those. To mixed effect.
Yeah. I think it's another one that like, it kind of puts a dent in the population.
Yeah.
It's not gonna like solve your problems, but if you have one tree and you really don't want to spray anything on it, but you have a lot of moths, you could hang several traps in it. And if you're better than I am about keeping up on like putting new solution in there,
not.
it's maybe nice. Which I'm not either. You're lucky if you get the traps out of the tree
Yeah.
the same year.
Same. Well, we're getting towards the end. Another question I have is, how legit are companion plants for apples? Because I have heard so much about companion plants for various things, and when I have tested them in the real world, I have found them generally to be highly ineffective. I do believe in this idea of like building a healthy ecosystem so that you have habitat for beneficial insects, but I haven't had good luck with like, I'm going to plant carrots and tomatoes in the same bed and everything's going to be really awesome because of that.
Yeah, I think I have a similar experience. I mean, I love companion planting. I think it's nice to have. I mean, if we're talking about like in the orchard, I think it's really lovely to have like lots of different plants that are blooming in the orchard and that are like available for food sources for pollinators and that smell nice and that like and that are useful, medicinally or for culinary use. But all I've heard of the companion plants that are like, oh well, this for that and this deters this and this attracts that other thing. Everything I've heard is kind of anecdotal.
Yeah.
I did hear one person say, I think that Nancy told me, who lives on the same road there at Mafka, is that she said that many years ago someone told her to plant daffodils around the orchard, around the bases of the trees to help prevent voles and voles and mice and rabbits. And oh man, now I'm thinking maybe she was talking about borers though. I think she said that the tree that had a bunch of daffodils around it did not have borers when there had sort of consistently been borers in other trees, which is funny because it's not exactly what it was intended for.
Yeah.
And like, was it just a fluke? I don't know.
It's also kind of counterintuitive because like people are always like clean cultivation around the base of the tree.
Yeah.
To not make it like
right
a haven for borers.
Yeah. I think that there was like there's like some space around the trunk, but daffodils sort of maybe in a ring around it. But I heard, I'm not going to remember what it was. I read something last year, the year before, about a certain herb being planted like to smother around the trunk for, I think it was for codling moth.
Fascinating.
And I just thought, well, if it is effective against codling moth, would it also be drawing a lot of borers, or do borers have any kind of preference for for like aromatic plants? Because that was for a while. John had this theory that, and I don't know, maybe it still is his theory. I don't know if he's sort of recorded any data about this, but planting like lots of aromatic plants right in the understory of the trees as a deterrent to different pests, to rodents and to like insect pests. I think codling moth was one of them, which is kind of odd that maybe they would care about aromatic plants. But I've sort of only heard anecdotal evidence of it. I also love like a healthy, balanced ecosystem, but I have yet to see any example of an orchard where like there's really nice fruit because of all this companion planting. I think there's just still so much that is happening up in the canopy.
Yeah.
That companion planting certainly could be helping to foster a better ecosystem for maybe for beneficial insects that are that are parasitizing or killing some of the pests, but I don't know that it could be a substitute for sort of like orchard canopy care.
Yeah.
In the realm of sprays.
I wish it was, but
I do too.
I think you're probably right.
I am a big fan of spraying trees with lots of different plant concoctions, plant teas.
Nice. What kind of concoctions do you like?
Yeah, many. But the sort of classic that Michael Phillips recommended years ago was horsetail, nettle, and comfrey, which is like a staple. I sort of use those three as my like base recipe, which I really like. And in more recent years, I've been adding things like bits of like willow twigs or bark or leaves or all of them, and and garlic. Well, I guess garlic is also one that Michael had recommended, but I think even like garlic leaves, like it could be any part of the garlic plant. And chives I've also put in. There's all sorts of stuff. The willow was recommended by Mike Biltonen, was like an early season plant spray. just as like sort of having that like aspirin effect of
yeah.
a way to sort of like boost the orchard in the spring a bit, along with those other plants that were available. I think the earliest sprays were sort of with nettle. It was with nettle and whole dandelion, and willow, and that was following a year where a lot of the trees in the orchard had really been hit hard by a variety of diseases, and this was sort of like almost like a spring tonic kind of thing. And some of this, it feels like a little ethereal and like well, you just have to believe in it and then maybe it's working. And who's to say? Like I'm not researching it, or so I'm. And I think there are some people who are putting more of like a research effort into this, but not a lot of people. A lot of growers are just kind of trying things and observing loosely.
Yeah. It's also like there's not probably much like money going into that.
No.
Not a ton of time. It's just like, I've got this stuff around. I'm going to do something with it. Are you making it like a fermented tea thing out of those plants and then spraying them?
Yeah, depending on the timing of collecting stuff, filling buckets, and weather for spraying, I try to do let them steep in a bucket for 3 to 5 days. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes it ends up being longer, and then they get a little stinky and nasty. Michael Phillips again was always saying that is great, but I hate that smell. So I like to do sort of like a short sit in a bucket for a few days.
Nice.
After a week, it's a little gnarly.
Yeah,
and the respirator comes in handy.
Well, those are all the questions that I had written down.
That's awesome.
Is there anything that I should have asked but didn't? Or anything you want to just throw in there as a final Apple thought?
No, I think those are all really great questions. The two things that I will throw in there are that one, we are hosting Maine Apple Camp again this August. I believe it's the weekend of August 28th. Just all weekend long in Hope at Camp Bishopwood. Is a fun event, like family friendly. There'll be lots of talks and panels, and crafts and all sorts of stuff
Cool.
all weekend. And then the other event, and that sort of process for planning it is just underway. And so I think some of the promotions are just now going out about that. And an event that happens annually, which I mentioned earlier, is the Wild and Seedling Pomological Exhibition, which takes place in Western Massachusetts, organized by Matt Kaminsky of Gnarly Pippins. And that is a really fun event for anyone interested in tree fruit of the seedling variety. It's you can taste every apple that's there, apple and pear.
Very cool.
And there's sort of a whole scene there, and lots of fun people who are of our
ilk.
Of our ilk, yes.
Cool. I'll try and have links to those things in the show notes.
Thanks. That's
for
great.
people.
And we are just barely in the getting the New York Apple Camp for 2027 in the works again. So that's another thing to look out for, but it's not anywhere yet.
on the horizon.
Yeah.
Cool. And if people want to follow your work with Fruit Buds or anything like that, is there a way you would like to be found, or should we leave it alone?
Liz and I have been meaning to make a website for Fruit Buds for ages. Some of my Fruit Buds work is on my Instagram. Which is, I think, just at Laura Seeger. And some of my Fedco work is, with all of the rest of Fedco's work is on Fedco's website.
Yeah, I've seen you and Jacob pop up a few times on the Fedco Instagram.
Sometimes Jacob and I make silly videos for Fedco.
They're very charming.
I'm glad you think so. And it's still it's still the ordering season for Fedco. We have not hit the deadline yet for Scionwood orders, rootstock orders, and then trees later. But everything is getting going in the warehouse.
Nice, great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come down to be on the podcast. It's awesome to be in person rather than just on Zoom with people. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
So nice to be here. Thanks, Aaron.